We might start again. I won't do everything in the sample exam, but I will just tell you what I'm looking for and give you some idea how to approach these questions. Let me say this outright, and this is for everyone to hear, I guess, if you're listening to the lecture, is your actual exam is not a copy of the sample exam, but if you prepare everything on the sample exam, which is a lot because there's 16 questions on the sample exam, but if you really, really, really want to do well, and if you prepare all the 16, you will find enough in the exam that overlaps with it, right? So, but you know, that requires you to prepare all the 16. So if you're really keen on doing well in the subject and are willing to prepare all the questions, then you will find, because you have to, you know, the instructions are exactly as they are on the exam. You have to do 6, at least 6 of these I can show you. So the exams are not identical, but there is plenty of overlap. That's what I'll say about the structure of the exam. And it's a different kind of exam. It's not short answer questions. It is forcing you to think hard about the positions that we have studied throughout this course. So what this involves is quotations, 8 in each section, and you have to pick at least 2. In all, you have to do 6, but at least 2 from the ethics section, and 2 from the metaphysics section, and 2 from wherever you like, you know, whichever set you prefer. So what are the 2 things you need to do when you're addressing these questions? As it says, state the position or the argument in your own words, concisely, and the context in which it occurs by stating the role that it plays in the debate about the relevant issue, and give a philosophical comment on the piece, which might be expository or critical or both. So here's what you need to do. First, you need to find the quotes which you think you know what exactly is the quote talking about. What is the position that is being discussed? Whose position is it? Is it the Hindu, Buddhist, or Charvak position? If you can go further and remember the school, that's good, but you know, that's not all that important. If you can't remember the particular Hindu school that had this view, that's fine too, as long as you at least identify the tradition that it belongs to and say something about, you know, what is happening in this quote, what is being discussed, and what's the issue here, you know, and then about making a philosophical comment. So let me give you an example. So the first quote, where is it coming from? In all living beings, this craving for oneself ceaselessly arises. May I not cease to live? This fear of death is inconceivable as a result of either perception or verbal communication. Sweeping on by the force of its own nature as a vision of extermination forces the inference that the pangs of death have already been experienced in previous births. What are we talking about here? What's that issue? Argument for rebirth. Exactly, it's the argument for rebirth in the Yoga Sutras, so in the Hindu tradition, and it's based on the argument from rebirth from the fear of death. You know, it's saying, may I not cease to live. This fear of death, inconceivable as a result of either perception. The argument, so the first thing you need to do is identify where it's coming from. It's the fear of death argument. The fear of death is used to argue for rebirth. We must have experienced death before in order to fear it, because even a newborn, remember they said even a newborn has this fear. You can't have learnt it by perception or inference or by hearing about it from someone, because everyone, this is the universal fear of death. Remember, I'm giving you detail, but you don't necessarily have to give detail as long as you identify this. They even say that even a worm quivers at the sign of being attacked. So that's the sense that there's a deep-seated fear of death. and a universal fear of death. So that's the that's the Hindu argument for rebirth based on fear of death. So that's what you say in the first part. You might spend a bit of time explaining the quote. So inconceivable as a result of either perception or inference or verbal communication. You might want to say something about that. Forces the inference that the pangs of death have already been. So it is an argument to the best explanation. It is making an inference, trying to explain the phenomena. What's the best explanation for the phenomena? That there is a universal fear of death. According to these Hindus, the best explanation is that we must have experienced death before, and therefore this is an argument for rebirth. That's what you say in the first part of it. Second part, which says give a philosophical comment. What is required here is you say something about how strong the argument is. So if you want to question the argument and say that something like the theory of evolution gives a better explanation, so the argument to the best explanation doesn't quite work, because we can offer a better explanation in terms of theory of evolution. If you don't think that, if you want to support that this is a strong argument, say something in favor of it. That's why I say it could be expository or it could be critical. It doesn't necessarily have to criticize the position. You might want to defend the position. You might want to add something to the position. That's fine too, but it's got to be a philosophical comment, saying what you think of this position. So not just describing the position, not just saying what role or what argument is being discussed here, but in the second part, going a little bit further and saying something about what do I think. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this sustainable? How it could be made better? Blah, blah, blah. Make sense? So you know how to approach these questions? Let me just randomly pick a few more. The second one there, can someone tell me what it might be? Therefore, without attachment, perform always the work that has to be done, for a man attains the highest by doing work without attachment. Nishikawa Kalman. Yep, this is Nishikawa Kalman from the Gita. And you can write reams on this. Explaining it first, saying what exactly is being said, that the strongest interpretation of Nishkama Karma is action without any desire at all, no desires at all. And that's the most favored interpretation of this doctrine. It's not saying give up a certain kind of attachment or give up selfish desires or give up this or that, but then it poses a problem. So try and explain this. It is from the Gita, it is Nishkama Karma. Why this works? Because according to the theory of karma, if you do actions, if you do good actions, you get positive karma. If you do bad actions, you get negative karma. But in order to get moksha, you need to get your karmic balance to zero. So what you need is to make sure that you do actions without any desires, so that you don't get any karmic residues, positive or negative. And to do that, and then, you can talk about the coherence of this, you can talk about the desirability of this in the philosophical comment, whatever you like. Lots of things you can say. You can discuss Chakrabarti, you can discuss Pramarin, you can, speak for yourself, whatever you like. So these questions are, in a sense, quite easy, in a sense difficult, because it's sometimes difficult to figure out where it might be from. What about number 5? Where might it be from? Pante Nagasena, what is the reason that all men are not alike, but some long-lived, some short-lived, some wise, and some foolish? Said the elder, Your Majesty, why are trees not all alike? I suppose, Pante, because of the seed. Where's this coming from? Yeah, it is from the Buddhist text. It is talking about the effects of karma. Why are all people not alike? Why are trees not alike? Because of their karmic residues, because of the kind of actions they've done in the past. They're using the analogy of the seed. It's because of the quality of the seed. It's because of, the sort of thing you've done in the past. What might you say in terms of a philosophical comment? So, here. Anything?
It's saying that karma creates the individual and how they choose the actions. Their actions and behaviors are dictated by the karma that they receive.
It's a bit strong to say dictated, because you do have a choice. So unlike the Hindus, the Buddhists don't have the caste system or anything like that. So it's not that your actions are dictated by the kind of birth or the kind of caste you're born into. So but even in the Hindu system, there is an element of choice. So I think dictated is too strong.
Okay, but it kind of it seems like it doesn't necessarily, you can get the karma at any time. It doesn't necessarily be when that you're born with it, but that it's transferred to you at any time, and that's the reason why your behavior or your person will change throughout your lifetime.
Yeah. Your personality will change throughout your lifetime, and you're quite right. Nothing is said about, when karmic residues or when karma will take effect. So it could be later, it could be sooner. But I think the thing to say, the thing to emphasize here is that does not mean that the individual has no control. You have to emphasize, I think, in the Buddhist way of thinking about things, that the present plays a very strong role. What you do in the present, how you choose to act, has a very strong role to play in how your future will shape, how the future will shape, not just your future. It's, sort of always difficult to talk about you and your in the Buddhist way of thinking about it. So you have to talk about how the future will shape on account of the present. But that's kind of built into the karma theory. Even though it's talking about how the past shapes the present, there is also the forward-looking element about how the present shapes the future. And free will is very important. Otherwise, it's not up to us, kind of thing. The Hindu picture or the Buddhist picture is not determinate in that way. Any other philosophical comment on this? Is this good, bad, ugly? Acceptable?
It might sound quite skeptical, but can you question what might be behind what's causing the karmic residue to pass over, to come into that sort of thing? Like, it kind of implies that there's some governing body which is responsible for giving that karmic residue to the new life as one passes it.
Yes, I mean, there is always going to be a tension. So you could point that out, that in the Buddhist view, there is the tension about how karma is passed over, because there's nothing continuing, the sorts of things we were discussing in the essay. When you say governing body, that worries me a little bit. I mean, are you thinking of there needs to be a god to oversee, that you get your karma and Manima gets hers, and So gets hers, and so on and so forth? Or yeah, it doesn't have to be religious. I mean, according to the way karma is thought about in the past, it's almost like a natural law. So it's a natural and a moral law. So this question about, why will only I get, the karma on account of my past actions? That's because the way the world is. It's like a natural law. There's nothing like someone keeping a bank book with pluses here and minuses here, and this is Manima's account, and this is Kim's account, and this is so-and-so's account. It's not like that. It's almost like gravity. If I throw a pen, it is going to go down. because that's the way the world is. That's how forces operate. Karma is a force in that way. According to these Hindus, there's no supercomputer keeping track. There is no God keeping track. Gods are subject to karma. You know, in the Buddhist way of thinking, there are no gods. But in the Hindu way of thinking, gods are subject to karma. In the sense that you could be reborn as a god, but then if you misbehave as a god, you can be reborn again as a tree or a brute or whatever. So that's how they describe it. So it's not as if there is a governing body. It works like a law. And you might want to question this law-like working because it's a moral theory. It's not a natural law. You know, this is what they're trying to use to explain the moral universe. You know, why should we think that the natural universe is moral? You know, things happen by accident. Evolution happens by accident in the natural world. It's not rule-governed in the sort of way. That's a worry to raise. Any other points? Okay, what about the last one? Number 8. While life is yours, live joyously. None can escape death's searching eye. When once this frame of yours they burn, how shall it ever again return? While life remains, let a man live happily. Chastity and such other ordinances are laid down by clever weaklings. Who's speaking here? Yep. That's the Charvak position. And who's the target of the attack? Who are the clever weaklings? The Hindus, the Brahmins, the Pandits, you know, those who hold the knowledge, they are the target of the attack. They make up this thing about, you know, having fasts and doing rituals and all of this. And all that the Charvakas, you know, want to put forward. Live joyously, have fun. Don't believe in all this crap about karma and, you know, next life and suffering and all that. Enjoy to the fullest, because once they burn you, once they cremate you, that's what the Hindus did. That's what all the Indians did. Not just the Hindus, all the Indians in ancient times did. You're never going to come back in this earth or any other place. This is all just chastity and other such ordinances are laid down by clever weaklings, and they go on to say to feed themselves, because there's these pundits, these Brahmins, they just make up these stories. You know, it's almost like to deceive the common masses that this is good for you, and you will feel, you know, you want to do it. Any philosophical comment on that? Good, bad? Materialist view? What might be wrong with it? Nothing wrong with having fun. Anything wrong with it? Anything in favor of it? Pardon? You think it is? It's good? You think it's good? Okay. Here's a Charvak. I thought you were a Buddhist until now, trying to defend the Buddhists, but you've changed your mind. Yeah. Yeah, don't think about the next life, you know. Do what you can in this planet and this life for yourself and have a good time. You know, all these stories about future lives and all of that is just made up stuff. What would happen? I mean, we've been talking so much about the future life and karma and all of that. How many of you think there's something like a future life? You think there is? You think there is? Don't know. There was that, which means I don't know. Yeah, so the Buddhist way of thinking about it, it's not you in the future. It is someone causally connected to you.
What we do now affects the future, but
Yeah, not necessarily us in the future, but there is a causal connection with the future. The Buddhist view is more believable in some sense. But it is amazing, though, that all of the world religions, whether they were, indigenous religions or whether they're post-axial religions, organized, unorganized, institutional, non-institutional, all have the notion of future life in order to motivate. Most of the world religions, Aboriginal religions, indigenous religions, anywhere in the world, any religion that you look at has, there might be some exceptions, but most religions that I have studied have some notion of future life. Why do you think that might be? Why can't people be motivated by what happens here? Why do they need this motivating force, other than in this life? Because humans are weak?
No, they want to remove fear of that humans feel when they think about.
They want to instill some
Comfort them.
comfort them. Huh?
I feel like it has something to do with survival, to be honest, as well. And again, maybe what they meant by future life, because what they say is that, physical and mental state that is not the same nor different will be passed on, which kind of sounds like if you have a kid, it's like it's your DNA.
Yeah.
But sort of same, sort of different. So I was thinking about that. I was like, yeah, you kind of think for your kids, and that's what we do. We have to. That's why we have maternal instincts.
Yeah.
Now we have to care for future generations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was thinking about that maybe, this is what they meant by that.
Something like, rebirth or, next life might just mean future generations, and according to the Buddhist, I think it does. Yeah.
I just think people always want things to be better than they are now.
Right. So there's something to this, all existence is suffering, things are not very good here, could be better.
It kind of even falls into craving, even if you don't think that existence is suffering.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you're having a good time now,
You
might
want
as
it
well
to
have
be
a better time
better.
later.
You want it always to be good,
Yeah.
And all be better than it is. There is that thing. And I think all of those points are good points about why we are forced to. Just another observation, I think the fact that we know also makes us aware that there are other things that we don't know. So just knowing X makes you aware that there's lots that you don't know. And that's the kind of thing that religion plays upon. There's things about the other world, beyond, up in the sky, down in the third, whatever, according to there's something that we don't know about, but it has a role to play in how our lives go, something like that. So it's the mystery of the unknown, life beyond that is, I think, also plays, because human beings, or any rational being, for example, will realize that there are limitations to what one can know. The fact that we have knowledge also makes us aware about the fact that there are other things that we might not know about, because that comes with the sense of discovery. When you discover something, you think, aha, I didn't know this before. But then you realize there must be lots of other things. There has to be other things that I don't know. And I think part of this plays on that. It's beyond what we know. It's beyond what you know, beyond what you can experience, beyond what you can infer. They will give you all sorts of arguments for why you should believe in it, but it's beyond that. But the Charvaks, of course, will have none of that. Let's do some metaphysics. We are halfway there. What about the first quote? Just because it is the self, it is impossible to entertain. Oh, there is a typo there. It is impossible for us to entertain the idea, even of its being capable of refutation, for the knowledge of the self is not in any person's case adventitious, not established by the so-called means of right knowledge, it's rather self-established. Who's talking here? The self is not capable of refutation. I cannot have the thought, I do not exist. Shankara, this is Vedanta metaphysics, Hindu view, why the self, it's an argument for the existence of the self, but it's an argument, if you remember, that Shankar uses. Again, you don't have to name the exact tradition, you don't have to name the thinker, but if you do, if you can remember, that's good. It's talking about the irrefutability of the self. No one can consistently entertain the idea that I do not exist. You cannot have this thought, I do not exist. And that's an idea that not only had by Shankar, but also by Descartes. Remember, in the cross-cultural idea that is used as an existence for an existence of a thinking being, more generally, not just a self, but the existence of a thinking being which continues to exist over time. Philosophical comment on this. So the second part of this quote, for the knowledge of self is not adventitious, it's not accidental, not established. You don't need to perceive it, you don't need to infer it. Knowledge of self is a means of right knowledge. So it's something that is presupposed. For you to say, I know there are people in this room, there must be first an I, which has the knowledge, a subject of experience, a subject of knowledge in this case. Philosophical comment on this. What did Shankar do with the essential irrefutability thesis? What did he do with that? Can anyone remember? Week 6. He uses that to come up with a proof for eternality of the self. And that's this code, this thesis. It is necessary that if I think I exist, then I must exist. That is used as a basis for that the self must exist always. It doesn't go through with a bad argument, but that's his strategy. He first gives you a very believable, a very good proof for the existence of a thinking thing. While I'm thinking, I cannot but be existing. There must be something that does the thinking. The I must exist. But then he uses that to argue for the eternality. I mean, this is, I think, one of the weakest things in this quote, but again, I'm not expecting everyone to say this. Drawing the parallel with Descartes, something worth saying here. That counts as a philosophical comment. Why, how come this idea has had, cross-cultural purchase? Let's see. What about number 3? There is something besides the collection of skandhas to which the word I applies. Here we do not consider the word I that we employ to be the means for inferring another thing besides the skandhas. Rather, we consider the experience of recognition which goes beyond the word to be the means of inference. Who's talking? What's at issue here? Last week, which was the lot last week? They were a kind of Hindus. Mimamsaka. This is Mimamsaka version of the argument from memory. Remember, this was something I read out in class. This is the Mimamsa version of the argument for memory. And what's being emphasized here is, it's kind of a response to the Buddhist objection. There is something besides the collection of skandhas. Skandhas is the Sanskrit word for mental and physical states. The 5 mental and physical states are called the skandhas 5. There has to be something besides the skandhas to which the word I applies, and we do not consider the word, so it's not a linguistic inference. They're not saying that the word I must have a reference, but rather, so it's not a linguistic argument that these Mimamsakas are offering. Rather, they're depending on the experience of recognition. So they're depending on the memory experience to establish the existence of the self. They say in memory, I do not just remember, seeing an apple or being here last week. I remember I was here last week. The very same being which now has the memory remembers that something which is the same as. So they're making a very strong claim about identity. It's not someone causally connected to me. When I have a memory of being here last week, I have a memory of me being here last week. And the me, in some sense, in my memory, I recognize that me then and me now are identical. Same person was here. And that's the referent of I, the thing that remains identical over time. That's their proof for the existence. It's the experience of recognition, recognizing that it was me, which goes beyond that. That experience is the basis of inference. It's not a linguistic argument that these Mimamsakas are offering. Philosophical comment on this. Anything you can remember? Something to say here is a lot of weight is being put on first-person experience. This is an argument from phenomenology, how we, from the inside, take things to be. And that's something we have to be very careful about, because we, from the inside, often get things wrong. That was, the Wittgensteinian point that we discussed. You can't get it, if you can't get it wrong, then you can't have it right either. We often confused about how we really feel, for example. You might say, you're feeling nauseous, or you have a feeling of being angry, where all it really is that you're really hungry. Sometimes being hungry makes you restless, and you don't realize you're hungry, you feel very tired, but really it's your body asking for food. What it is a feeling of hunger, but we are often confused. So putting on too much weight on these first-person phenomenology, on the first-person experiences, is very dangerous, because there is reason to think that we often get it wrong. But that's where they put their argument. Their argument stands on the experience of recognition from the inside. I have this feeling. So it's entirely up to every person, So if I ask you, do you believe in the argument from memory that the Mimamsakas offer? You have to ask yourself, do you recognize to be exactly the same person? And I think it was you last week who said, no, it's not the same person. It's a different person. I've changed in some sense, and I recognize that. But they want to capture that it is, in some sense, you might have changed, but there is a sense in which you are the same person, and that's the self. That sense that you remember being here, in the sense of being the same person, that's what the self is. Haven't really done the Buddhist quote, so I won't read any of those. Buddhist metaphysics, we'll cover them next week. Very quickly, what's number 6? As from the motion of a chariot, we infer the existence of an intelligent guiding agent in the shape of the charioteer, so we also infer an intelligent guiding agent for the body from the activity and secession from activity appearing in the body, which have the capacity of acquiring the desirable and avoiding the undesirable. Who's talking here? Pardon? Buddha?
I mean, like, it's the Buddha's argument for the fact that there's no such thing as an ego.
Intelligent guiding agent?
The mind, the difference between the mind and the soul, or
No, this is not the Buddha. This is And that's why I think this is a trick question. The chariot is an analogy used both by the Buddhists and by the Nyaya. This is actually a Nyaya argument. And the intelligent guiding agent is their self. The Nyaya say, just from seeing the movements of her body, the last part which we say, so we infer an intelligent guiding agent for the body from the activity which has the capacity. So we move towards things that are desirable and we move away from things that are undesirable. That shows that the body is guided by an intelligent agent, and for them the intelligent agent must be the soul, something separate from the body. So this is a Nyaya argument for the existence of the self. It's based on, from the movements of the body, moving towards things that are desirable and moving away from things that are undesirable, we infer that there must be something separate from the body that is doing the guiding. That is the guiding agent. Philosophical comment? Can you infer from the intelligent movements of something, Google driverless cars, can you infer that there is an intelligent agent guiding the car? Must you infer that there is an intelligent charioteer in there? Stopping at red lights, giving indicators before changing lanes, doing all the right things, doing a head check. I almost sound like a driving instructor, don't I? Giving you these. Is that a good enough reason to think that there must be something inside doing the guiding?
Why does it have to be separate from the body?
Why can't the body itself be programmed to do?
It's not that, like, your body's hungry, like, that's and you'll go get food, but that's not just something that you design, that's because your body
Yeah.
wants that. Especially, I find a lot of these things, the brain is part of the body, and that controls a lot. So
Yeah. So, very good point. The kind of self, the intelligent guiding agent separate from the body that the Hindus want to infer. It's like the chariot and the charioteer, the body and the self, these are separate things. That's what the worry is with this picture. There might be some notion of intelligence, but, some intelligent activity, something which requires, creativity going on, but that does not license the inference of a self separate from the body. Self separate. In fact, the Hindus say, and your point about the brain is very relevant. The Hindus say the self is separate from the mind, body, and the senses. These three things go in the category of not self, and then there is the self over and above. The consciousness, it belongs to the self, mind, body, and the senses don't have that. So I think that's a nice philosophical comment to make, that, this might be a good argument for saying there's some intelligent activity going on, but why do we need to say that the intelligent agent is necessarily independent, separate from the body? That second conclusion is not warranted by the Hindu argument. So I think I might stop there. So does everyone get a sense of what is supposed to be done? Yeah?
how many words do
Good question. Again, I'll say what I said before in discussing the essay questions. In philosophy, we are after quality, not quantity. So maximum, a paragraph, up to a page, not more than that. So as long as you get the points right and do them succinctly, that's fine. We're not after looking for lots and lots of words. We are more, you get straight to the point, explain the quote, make a philosophical comment. Even less than a page is fine. You don't necessarily have to fill up the entire copybook, script book, etc. So maximum, in terms of words, I'll say 500 words. Don't go beyond that, but depending on how people write, sometimes 500 words might take. That's maximum. 300 would be fine too, as long as you've got the main points that you need to capture here. Any other questions? Mm-hmm. Word count is 2,000 words. That's what it says, I think. Let me have a look. I did print the instructions, so sometimes I make up stories as I go along, so I thought I better not do that. 2,000 word essay. That's what the unit guide says. You have a 10% room. Over 10%, under 10% is acceptable. References won't be counted. You might think 2,000 is a lot of words, but really not. The essay questions require you to do quite a bit. So think hard about the things you really need to put in. Any other questions? All the best. Have a good break. And I shall see you in week 8. And we'll talk Buddhist metaphysics.